Welcome back to the Glow Up Girl podcast. I'm Kyra. Thank you all for joining. All right, let's welcome Reverend Jocelyn to the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Kyra. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you. So, we're going to go ahead and kick off our discussion by having you tell the audience listening or watching out there who you are and what you do.
Yes, well, my name is Reverend Jocelyn, but I didn't start off as Rev. I worked at my church for many years as a executive director of a nonprofit. While working there, I saw a lot of things that impacted me as it related to trauma. My nonprofit agency was on the south side of Chicago. We work with young people, and unfortunately, we lost many of the youth that we served to gun violence. I'm also a sexual violence survivor, and the trauma that I experienced really it wrecked me, but in silence. I wore a mask pretending I was okay. I threw myself into ministry working at my church, ran from my pain for many years. It was until I was in my 30s where I realized that this is impacting your relationships, this is impacting your self-esteem, this is impacting so much of your life. You need to deal with this. Girl, you need a counselor. And so I started going to therapy, working on my stuff, and this has been an ongoing process. But through the work that I was doing on my own healing, I also felt the need to try to help others as well, but I didn't know how. I was searching for my next step in my call for years, Kyra, and it was a struggle because I felt like the work that I was doing at my church was meaningful, but I also knew there was more. So I did, while I was working at the nonprofit, I went to get my master's degree in social work. And then eventually I went to seminary school to find myself. And I'm like, God, what am I supposed to do? And while I was at seminary, they asked us, what is your call? What's your vocation? And I looked at them like a deer in headlights. And that was me for about 2 years, me asking God, what is next? What is next? What is my call? And it felt like God was giving me the silent treatment, but he wasn't. God was not giving me the silent treatment. It was just, it wasn't clear right away. But
Mhm,
I remember when I was attending a wedding reception, I
mhm.
ran into the former youth minister of my church in the bathroom, and she asked me how I was doing, Kyra. And she made a mistake by asking me that because at that moment I was having like a whole crisis of life. And I was like, I'm trying to ask God, what am I supposed to be doing with myself? It doesn't seem like God's telling me. I feel like I'm called to do this. I'm just word vomiting all over her. And she was like, I need you to breathe. Like, please slow down. She says, Jocelyn, God orders your steps, not your leaps. And that was huge for me. That was the week I came off of a week fast, consecrating myself, asking God to show me my next steps. And when I came home that day after that bathroom moment, God gave me the word journey and reminded me that we are on this journey of faith. And I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have all the answers, but he's with us on this faith journey. And I named my ministry Faith on the Journey. And it started off as a blog of me writing testimonies of how God was a healer and got people through difficult times. It then evolved into a book, which evolved into a podcast, which eventually evolved into me starting trauma healing groups, which are Bible studies to help people heal from trauma. That started local, became national. And then I developed a Christian counseling practice. And now I actually help other women who feel called, who are wrestling with me, like I was several years ago, to discover their call to ministry and to answer it.
Woo! Okay, so wait, there's you, Reverend Jocelyn, you already dropping the nuggets, and we just in what you said there. There were so many things that I feel like, especially women, deal with. One thing you mentioned earlier, very early when you were speaking, is that you were wearing a mask. And I wrote that down because there are so many people that do that. We all do that, right? We all, because we're like, well, it's okay. I need to keep pushing. I need to keep pushing forward. So I just need to do this. I need to do this so I can
Mhm.
keep going. And the second thing is just about your healing, right? When you come to that place of realizing that you have to heal and that you got help. We all know that there are lots of resources out there to provide us with help. therapy, counseling, but it's still hard for people to take that first step a lot of times to actually get the help that we need in order to heal. I know we talked through that you got the help, but can you talk about like taking that step to say, like you said it, you said, I need to get help. But because sometimes we say it and then we don't immediately do it. We tell ourselves we need it, but then we find all these other reasons why not to do it.
Yeah, it was for me when I realized I was self-sabotaging a healthy relationship with a gentleman
Mhm,
who I was dating. I
mhm,
could not let him fully see me. I had this barrier between us, and it was one of those things where when you've been hurt, when you've experienced trauma, one of those responses, I'm trying to protect myself, keep myself
mhm,
safe. And in trying to keep yourself safe, if you keep yourself in a cage, keep yourself safe, but you're not letting people in, also healthy relationships in. And I just wasn't in a place where I could be healthy enough to be in relationship because I had self-esteem issues, trust issues, things of that nature, and was just trying to find myself. But in that, once that relationship ended, it was like a moment where I was looking at myself in the mirror, like, you need to do something. And sitting with the counselor, starting to work with one, and starting to deal with some of the sexual trauma from 10 years ago,
mhm,
it was a process. Now, in transparency, I was in and out of counseling because sometimes when you're starting to deal with stuff and you're kind of like, oh, okay, I'm fine now. I talked about it. It is not a quick and easy done
mm-mm,
type thing.
mm-mm.
It is
No.
again a process. And with that, I realized that if I'm going to be doing this work, I need to practice what I preach. And now I tell everyone, I think everyone needs to be on someone's couch. You can have Jesus and you can have a therapist. And
Yes.
even though I have a Christian counseling practice, I have therapy sessions at least twice a month, keeping me
Mhm,
right, because I realize I am not at a place of arrival. And if we're living this life, there's going to be challenges that we constantly face that we need
mhm,
to process.
mhm,
And taking care of our mental health is important.
mhm,
So for me, I realized that I need to practice what I preach. I want to be well. I want to be healthy, not just for purposes of a romantic partner, just but in general, I want to
mhm,
be well.
mhm.
And I'm worth the work. That's the thing.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so I love that you said that because I think that's something that sometimes a lot of Christians struggle with is when you get to the place of like, oh, I want to go to therapy. And it's like, oh, you got Jesus. You can just, you could just pray. And so I remember when I started therapy back in 2018. And I remember when I started, and it was like having those conversations with my parents because they were more, old school of like, you can just pray about these things. And I was just like, yeah, I hear you, but like, I think I can love God and I can worship and I can ask Jesus, I can talk to Jesus, but I need like somebody like in the real, like God puts people in these positions to help us. And I said, and as long as I feel like I'm finding the right person who is also grounded and can help me, I said, that's important. So that was like a whole, like probably for the first 3 months that I went, it was just like, and then also too, when you start to, like you said, healing, no matter what it is and what area, when you're in the therapy, it does open up these, wounds and these situations, especially when you look at like sort of older generations. And my parents immediately thought they'd done something. It's like, y'all didn't do anything. It has nothing to do with you. It's things that I've experienced in my life that now I realize these things are barriers and roadblocks for me in whether it's a relationship, whether it's just like you said, confidence or having boundaries. Mine were just a really big part was like I didn't have boundaries and I was just letting people just ramshack and just get, well, can you help with this? Can you do that? Can you do that? And I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I said, but then at the root of that, you have to look at like it's because you want to be accepted. Like you want acceptance. So therefore, you're willing to just run yourself ragged to help people who will probably never give you back in return what you gave them. And so, once we started to have those conversations, and I was like, oh, and I talk about God all the time and like therapy, like my therapist knows that I have very strong faith. And I said, so no, nobody in therapy is trying to lead you away from your faith. So as we talked about that, and then I think as time progressed, and as we went into the pandemic and they began to be able to see more about the importance of taking care of our mental health and our mental well-being, and now they get it, and so I think that those things, I'm so glad you called that out. And you can love God, and you can also love your therapist, because I love mine.
Mhm.
She is awesome.
Yes, yes, team therapy. All right.
Yes. And so another thing that stood out to me is when you say you felt like God was giving you the silent treatment. And I'm just telling you, because we just talking here, girl. Like I was like, oh, yes. Oh, thank you. I said thank you. In my head, I said thank you, God, because your word just like spoke volumes for me. And in a space that I'm in right now. And in that time of feeling, you listening, God. I mean, I've been saying this for like a few weeks, like months, years. As I was looking in my Bible app, and you know how you can record prayers in there. And I was
Mhm,
looking
mhm.
at the prayer, I was like, "Oh, that was from that was last year. That's still the same." Yeah, that's still. But I appreciate what you said and what your friend that you ran into, what was spoken into you, because I feel like I took that too.
Girl.
But what do you say to people? Because there are probably some people who are listening right now and watching us, and they're thinking, Reverend Jocelyn, yes, I feel like I've been talking and been asking, and it's just not like nothing's happening. What do you say to those people?
Yes, I say you think nothing's happening, but something is happening. I do realize that even though the direct answer that I was looking for, like I wanted a sign from God where it was like written across the sky. He gave me the A to Z plan. That's how I work. I wanted that.
Yeah,
And
those
and I
flashing.
right, I wanted that. And so I think sometimes people want that. They want the burning bush moment, and God doesn't always show up like that. He often orders our steps, and he's moving, but we might not see the movement in the way we want to see it. And I think we have to honor that, because God is wise in that. Because if he showed us the full A to Z, some of us would be like, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks, God. I'm straight. I don't want to I don't want to have to go through all that. That's just too much.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, all the things that I had to go through to build my ministry, the patriarchy, the resistance of me being a woman in ministry, the doors being shut in my face to even become
Mhm.
reverend, all these things that I had to go through, I probably would have passed on it or backed down if I knew the process in its entirety.
Mhm.
So God gave me enough at a time that I can handle to say, okay, I can do this one faithful step. For me, for that person who is saying God's not talking, God is still moving you by positioning you, by connecting you with the people that you need to be connected with, by saying, okay, how about you attend this meeting? For example, I mentioned earlier in my story that I now do trauma healing groups across the country. That wasn't something I sought out to do. I knew I wanted to do something in the range of healing, but someone invited me to this meeting and said, "Hey, Jocelyn, we're dealing with trauma. There's some a training. Why don't you come?" And through that invitation, when I sat in through the experience, I'm like, this is what I've been praying. This is it. I
Mhm.
didn't discover that. It was God ordering my step. He opened the door. I said yes. I walked in. Bam, this is my step. Okay, let me explore this. And then that's how it worked. I wish I could say I was brilliant enough to figure all this stuff out. But no, God is going to move you. He's going to show you. He's going to speak to you. And and with that, I also think it's important that we ask ourselves certain questions and we have time to reflect. I also think that sometimes people don't hear God because their world is just so busy,
Mhm.
crowded, and the voice of God is just drowned out.
Mhm.
And that's it's so ironic that week I told you that the woman gave me that word. I fasted. I slowed
Mhm,
down. I consecrated myself so that I could hear from God because my life was so busy. My plate was
mhm,
overflowing. My mind was noisy. And when I started reflecting and saying, okay, what are the gifts that I have? What are the passions that I have? Who do I feel called to serve? These are questions that I feel like if we sat and asked, then we can begin to feel those things that we're led to. One other question I like to ask is what cause burdens you? Is there something in this world when you see it, you get upset, you get worked up about it? You might be the one who's called to answer that problem. So
mhm.
sitting with those questions and making time to be quiet with our savior, our creator, God is speaking and God does move.
I like that because that is also that's all so true. And you're so right about like, yeah, if you saw the roadmap, if you saw it, then you would either say, like you said, pass,
Mm.
hard pass, God, or you might say, oh, can I just jump to the end, please?
Right.
Like, can we skip the part where I grow?
Yeah.
Because I mean, let's
Mm.
let's be honest, that's the part, the rough parts are the parts where you are sharpening and you are growing and you're building the testimony that you can help someone else with. So yes, I think a lot about, just us wanting to know the end. I'm just trying to rush to the end. I appreciate that. And I appreciate what you said about, yes, slowing down. Like you have to slow down and you have to take some time to step away from the things in your life that are just like busy. Because so many of us are just busy all the time. And I know we were pre-talking before we started the show about just I was just talking about like the pandemic time. Like that was the time where my life got very slow. And then I thought about like how really on like every weekend I was just doing things. I was going places, I was doing stuff, and I'm like, "Mm, no." And like now, I mean, I'm very intentional about how I spend my time when I'm not working, how I spend my weekends. And it's not like I'm not just hanging out with people for the sake of saying I'm hanging out. I mean, I have probably the people I'm going to make the move to hang out with is probably like 10 or below. And so,
Mhm.
and that's okay. And I'm totally fine with that because I'm at peace about it. And I have peaceful weekends where it's just like, oh, like I get to do what I want to do. I'm just not out in the street, just like out there just to be. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people because you feel like, they have to fill the space with the things. Like there can't be a quiet moment because I think some of us are afraid of our thoughts. Like if it's too quiet, I got to no. Let me call. If it's too
That's
quiet, let me
right.
call somebody.
Yep, yep, yep. Seriously, versus taking time to sit with God, or dealing with it. Yeah, the quiet could be so loud when we start
Yes.
thinking about the things that we have been running from. But
Hmm.
I'm telling you, you can't run your whole life. I guess you can, but it's gonna cost you if you
Yes.
keep running your whole life.
Yeah. 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 And so yeah, I definitely think those are some very good points and just so I know people may be saying like, oh, I don't know if I'm able to fast. Like, I mean, like try a half day fast,
There you go.
just, build up, try maybe, oh, I'm gonna fast from the time I wake up till lunchtime. But
Mhm.
in doing that too, also allow for yourself and your mind to be open to hearing what
Yes.
it is because you're asking. And it's true. It's very, I know I made a joke about it a little bit earlier, but Reverend Jocelyn is right. God is always working, He is always speaking. It's just a matter of like, do we hear it? Are we
Mhm.
open to hearing it? Because He might
Mhm.
be telling us something we on the other side because it's not what we think we want to hear. So we are just like blocking, like, nope. Let me put my headphones on, listen to some music. So it's like we find all these things to like we're blocking like from blocking ourselves from hearing. So yes, you did talk about you started to touch on just some of the obstacles and the challenges you faced as a woman going into ministry. Now, I think that this is something that extends across if whether you are a woman in corporate America, you are an entrepreneur, you are a student. Can you talk about some of those challenges you faced and what did you do? How did I know you gave us a really good example of a way that, God opened the door for you with this meeting. But what were some of the things when you maybe got down and you were like, oh, like, I don't know, should I?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I remember one of the challenges was when I felt like I was called to start a Christian counseling practice. And initially, I was the one who was planning to do most of the counseling. So I
Mhm,
sought out to get a certification to be a biblical counselor. I went through this process and it was a lot of self study. I took courses for about a year. And
mhm,
then towards the end of the process, it was a requirement for you to write this 40-page paper. You had to look to books and everything. And I finished the paper. I submitted my application. I was very excited because then I would go into the next phase of the process.
mhm,
And I got a reply back from the committee. Essentially, it led me to believe that they didn't even read that 40-page paper. They just looked at my application and saw that I was a woman who was ordained and they did not believe in women being ordained. And I also attended more liberal seminary school. And because of my affiliation with the institution, they didn't want to consider my application. And so that's what happened. It ended there. They didn't consider me to go to the next phase to start my supervision. I was
mhm,
devastated. I was very upset. And when that happened, I'm like, God, well, what in the world? I thought that this was what I'm supposed to be doing. Why did this
mhm.
door just close?
Right.
And I was in my feelings for a minute. Then I called a girlfriend. This is why you have
Mhm,
to have wise counsel around you, because with that, she was like, okay, sis, I know you upset, but listen, what are you going to do? What are you going to do now? How are you going to, use this moment and pivot?
mhm.
And for me, when I licked my wounds and got myself together, I was like, okay, God, I'm still meant to do this work, but maybe it's not me who's meant to do it.
Mm,
I am someone who's a visionary. So maybe I run the company and hire
yeah.
individuals who are already trained to be the counselors. And that's what
Mhm.
I did. And I realized that was the best move for me because I did not want to be the individual doing all the counseling sessions because there's so
Right.
many other dynamics. But
Mhm,
I could hire people who've
mhm.
already gone through the process and create a team. And I was so grateful I did that. That was the best thing
Yes.
for me. And I also had the foundation. The study that I did for that year wasn't in vain. I still learned
Mhm,
tremendous value. They can't take that from me. And I
mhm,
don't need a governing body to define my worth and value. Now, granted, I didn't get finish that certification through them, but there's other means. If
mhm,
for me, for example, if I wanted to go that route and continue to do the counseling personally, I would have had to figure out a way to say, okay, what is another institution that I can go to? Lesson learned. I need to make sure that I do my research up front and see like what their requirements are. What are they looking for? Are they in
mhm,
line with my beliefs? What are their beliefs? How does this work? Ask the right questions. So that happened to me once and ain't gonna happen to me again. These are the things I had to learn from that
mhm,
and
mhm,
realize that sometimes doors will shut, but if it happens, if they don't let you at their table, you create your own table. And that's
mhm.
what I live by.
Yes, I love that. Yes, that is, thank you so much for sharing that because I think that is so many people experience that type of situation, but in their own life. And I love that, it was like you said, you had wise counsel to give you some good advice. You pivoted, but you pivoted into something that ultimately made the most sense for you because, yes, Reverend Jocelyn wasn't going to be able to do all these things and then continue to grow this amazing, like, platform on the side. So you had to put in the right people. And I think that's something, especially for women, that it's so hard, right, when we're trying delegating things because nobody can do it better than the way we could do it because we came up with the idea and, and it's ours. And no, I need to bring this to life. I say, y'all know I say that because I struggle with that myself. So that's why I put myself out there on blast. But it's so amazing that God saw that already. He knows you. That's why I'm always like, He already knows us and who we are. And so by putting you in that situation to have to figure out a different route. It allowed for you to put yourself in the best place. But I also really like too that something that's so important is that you extracted the learnings from that. You took all the lessons learned. You said, now, if I go back this route and I decide to get this certification, I'm going to ask the right questions. I'm going to do the research. And not that you didn't do research before, but you're just going to take it like a level deeper to some of the things that maybe you missed the last time. Because sometimes we just think, right? Like, oh, we're doing this work. And especially when we're doing things that matter and are meaningful, then you think that, yeah, other meaning people are doing it and are looking at it the same way. And turns out not always. Whew, I like that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was a good one. Like, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm still sitting. I'm still sitting with that, right? I'm still sitting with that right now because I feel like it is just this example happens across various, like, if you work in corporate America, I mean, if you were in corporate America and you're like, oh yeah, I've got the idea and I've come up with this, I've built a plan and all this and da 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 da. And sometimes the plan, while it's great, sometimes people don't like the deliverer of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't fit what the audience thought you should look like or who you should be, then you're immediately like cast to the side. And one thing that I really like, Reverend Jocelyn, is that you didn't allow for that. Like, you sat there for a minute. You honored your feelings of, oh, I don't like this. I feel hurt by this. But the one thing we learned in therapy, you honor it, but you don't allow for it to come in and move in and take up
Mm-hmm.
residence.
Exactly.
And so I love that you honored it, the feeling, but then at the same time, you was like, okay, but this does not define me and the work that I'm going to do. And that's a amen, hallelujah moment right there, because I'm all about when God is giving somebody to give me a word, that's giving me a word. Like, I've had an
Amen.
experience like that over like the last 6 months of where it's like, oh, I mean, but I'm delivering. You just don't like the messenger. Okay, I got you. So
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
just really good. That's why it's so important, people, to have like solid people in your network, in your circle. But then also, while yes, I talked about, yes, I've got like less than 10 people who, I'm gonna rise to the challenge and go hang out with. But through this podcast, I feel like God has put people. There have been people that come on this show, and we have this moment that I'm having with you, where it is like not only giving to my community, but you're feeding me spiritually. And it's like something that things I've been going through that I'm like, okay, thank you, Jesus.
Amen. God works. He knows. He knows. And let me tell you something, and this is for everybody. No person on earth can stop what God has in store for you as long as you don't give up. And that's the thing. Sometimes when we're in the face of resistance, and the resistance is going to come as a part of the process, the enemy is like, see what happens. I told you, you over your head. You're not called for this. You're doing too much, and he's using it as an opportunity to be like, that's why you need to quit. And that's the enemy, sneaky. He does not play fair. But that's definitely not God. In that instance, it's one of those things where God is with you saying, nope, don't give up. This is just an opportunity for you to pivot. This is an opportunity for you to grow your muscles. This is an opportunity for you to activate your faith. But people cannot stop the plans that I have for you as long as you stay in the game, as long as you don't quit. And that's the thing. The enemy wants us to quit, but we can't, because our calling, our ministry, what God has given us is bigger than us. And I tell women, I coach that all the time. If you think that your calling is simply about you having this feeling of fulfillment, that's a byproduct of it. Your calling is one in which God has unique gifts for you. He planted in you for a specific purpose. There are people who only you can touch, who is waiting for you to step out and call and answer your ministry and answer your call to ministry. And so with that, it's not about you. You have to get out of your feelings and move forward regardless of how, disappointment comes, the challenges
Mhm.
come. And again, you will have the fulfillment and joy and all that as a result as well. But I
Mhm.
think people, when they approach this, they don't see the significance of them staying the course. And that's the point I'm trying
Mhm.
to make.
I like that. I think that is a great point. And something else you said earlier was, what is the cause that sets your soul on fire almost, right? The thing that
Mm-hmm.
gets you like, you're like, oh, I'm fighting for that. that. And I think when you understand also could be, looked at as being your purpose, right? So when
Mhm.
you realize that, like you said, like nobody can stop the plan. Nobody can stop you from pushing. You have to maintain the fight. And it's okay. Is that's why, we're talking about like also just having like a therapist or a counselor, because it's important, because there will be moments when you get down. There will be moments when you say, I just don't know if I want to even fight anymore. Like,
Mhm.
I said that this week, y'all, and just all transparency, honestly, to my therapist on Thursday. I said, you know what? I'm girl, just tired of fighting. Like, I'm tired of I'm just tired. Like, I'm tired of
Real
fighting
talk, real talk.
all the time for like everything and everyone else. And I'm like, and who's fighting for me? Like, and I told her, I said, look, and the sense of what therapy allows for you is that place to be vulnerable and say that. Because like at the end of the day, like I know who I am, and I'm gonna turn that thing around, and I'm gonna pray, and I'm gonna keep pushing forward, and I am. But being in therapy and being able to heal yourself and help yourself grow allows for you to be able to have that safe space to say, I just got my hands up right now. Like the week has beat me down. The last 6 months have beat me down. This year has beat me down. So I'm just putting them up right now. And so it allows you that space. And all I always think about is imagining people who don't have that. Like, "Ooh, what do you do when you don't have that? Like what?
That's so and that's real, and I think what ends up happening is sometimes people try to make their friends their therapist,
Yes.
their spouse their therapist. They might try to look at their pastor to be that, but they often, unless they've gone to school for it, they don't have the training, and even if they do have the
Yes.
training, that is not their role to be
Yes.
that for you. And so we have to be able to distinguish that. And in this, I really appreciate what you said, because we will have those moments. Thing is though, you have those moments, you work through, you acknowledge the emotions, all the things we were saying, but you're still staying in the game. And
Yes.
that is the thing. We might need to have a pause, we might need to reevaluate, we might need to have a Selah, all that I get. But at the
Hmm.
end of the day, if God has not released you, you got to stay in the game.
Hmm.
And
You're
and
right.
that's my point.
Something you said that I really appreciate is that you are so right. People try to make their friends, spouses, partners, whomever, their therapists. And like you said, the most important thing, they are not trained to do that. And then in some cases, they don't have the tools to do it. And you said that because oh, I love this. I just love this conversation for me too, because this is just like, I mean, this morning God said to me as I got out the bed, because and my husband said, he was like, oh, he's like, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? And I said, oh, yeah. And then in that moment, God was like, see, now you be out here getting mad at this man because you be up here trying to make him into your therapist 2.0 when you want to tell him stuff and you realize like that isn't the role that he's played. And I said, oh, I was
Oh,
like, oh,
God be checking us. God be checking us.
I mean, I just woke up, Lord. I mean,
You just hit me with that in the morning like that. Gotta brush my teeth? What?
I just got up. I mean, what we doing here? But I'm so glad that he brought that to me, because I was saying that to my therapist this week that like, oh yeah, I was trying to tell him this thing, and it was like, I mean, he was working on something, but it was like I was upset because I felt like he didn't want to listen, like he didn't want to listen. But at the what was put in front of me this morning is that, I mean, Kyra, it could be uncomfortable for him because he doesn't have the tools to help you in that way. And and my therapist even said, she was like, yeah, the hardest part for your partner or significant other is that they let you down and that they feel like they can't help you. And I thought about that and I said, you know what, you're right. Because before I came home to work like remotely full time, I mean, yeah, there were, people in my circle, right, that would get these little nuggets, friends that I got to see, that I'm close with, that I got to see all the time. So we would have those conversations. And he didn't, he got some of it, but he wasn't getting at the level of like I've been trying to force upon. And so then when God said that this morning, then I was convicted. And I said, you're right. I have been wrong, Lord. I have been wrong. And when he gets up this morning, I was like, when he gets up and we, are talking, I need to just apologize because I have been wrong in trying to force somebody into, you can go to school for this. I'm out here trying to make you talk about the feelings wheel. Well, let's pull out the wheel and tell them how you feel.
The feelings, Will.
But I appreciate those moments because it's very, and it doesn't always sound like that, y'all. but I'm just thankful for that, those gentle nudges and being corrected, and being able to see my part in it and not just blame, just saying that, oh, someone else isn't giving me what
That's
I need.
maturity though. That is maturity, spiritual maturity to be able to self-reflect, look at yourself, own your stuff, and also receive correction from God. The Holy Spirit talks to us sometimes and we be like, "No, no, no. It's not about me." We don't receive the correction. But in the
Yeah.
correction we don't grow. So I love what you just
No,
said.
no, we
It,
don't.
we don't
Yeah.
grow. If we don't receive the correction, we continue to do
Hmm.
the same craziness over and over, continue to fail the test.
Hmm.
So praise God that you were able to receive the
Yes.
correction.
Thank you, Lord, for and for me, Kyra, and for you passing this side, girl. Okay. All right. So talk about your book. So you wrote a book called Sister Start Your Ministry. And so now
Mhm.
after us talking to you and hearing your story, I mean, it is like, so I see why you wrote this book, but can you tell us the inspiration and what are like some of the takeaways from this book?
Yes. The inspiration is I would have loved to have this book myself many years ago when I was searching for my calling and then afraid. I remember when I was beginning to step out and write my first book several years back, I didn't feel like I was good enough. I was struggling with imposter syndrome. Even though I had a master's degree, was educated, worked in field, it didn't matter. Imposter syndrome hits women of all different fields, ages, and all that stuff. And so I was struggling with that fear, doubt, and it was sisters being around me saying, "Hey, no, you can do this. No, for real. You're called to do this. God's going to equip you with what you need." And that gave me the push that was needed. And I wanted to be able to do that through my book. First of all, say, "Hey, sis, I know the fear is going to come, the doubt, all that stuff. But no, if God gave this to you, you're called, need to answer it. And it's worth it." Right. So we talk about that. But then I also did a lot of reflecting over the last several years of my journey. And I developed what I call the ministry development cycle that talks about the cycle you go through when developing your ministry. When you start off
Mhm.
in the discernment phase, when you're praying, reflecting, saying, "God, what's my focus? Who am I called to serve? Is this going to be a nonprofit? Is this going to be a for profit? All the different things you're discerning." And then you go into the equipping phase of the process where you are now getting the training. If you need to get certified, if you need to go back to school, what do you need to do to level up your skills? Because that's the thing. Even though we might be passionate, if we lack the skills training, in some cases we can do harm. If we want to be operating from the spirit of excellence, we do need to level up our skills. So we have the equipping part of the phase. Then we
Mhm.
need to create a plan. You hear about writing the vision and making it plain. You need to
Mhm.
write that plan down. I talk to a lot of sisters who they are creatives and God has given them ideas. Sometimes they are just overwhelmed with their wonderfulness of just ideas left and right. And so they just thinking constantly, doing all type of stuff all over the place. Okay, sis, slow it down. We
Mhm.
need to create a ministry plan, just like a business plan. What is your ministry plan? How are we doing this? What's our focus? How are we reaching people? How are we going to have the
Mhm.
finances behind this? Let's come up with a plan. And then I have the people out there who I love. I'm talking to some of my sisters out there who they like to cross every T, dot every I. They have a plan. I mean, they have a plan that's so well witnessed with binders and sticky notes and everything, but they won't actually implement. It's like,
Yes.
no, no, you don't have to be a mad scientist in your little small room for 2 years straight, making sure everything's perfect before you do this.
Mhm.
Before you start the podcast, before you start the program initiative, you need to actually get out there and take imperfect action,
Yes.
understanding that God's grace will fill in the gaps, allowing yourself to learn from your mistakes so that you can grow from those mistakes. But if you continue to stay in the plan part of the process and don't finish the cycle with the implementation, then you'll never learn. And I call it a cycle because through the implementation, you go back to discernment again and said, "Okay, what did I learn from that?" You have to have the reflection saying, "Okay, did I get something? What would I change?" So it's an ever evolving process and cycle that you go through. And so I talk about that. I talk about the process of balancing things as a woman of God called to ministry, as a wife, as someone who's in church, as someone who might have your 9 to 5 while you're trying to start your business. It is like we have so many different things going on. We have to be intentional about how we engage in ministry so we can sustain ourselves, not burn out, have the delegation systems in place, be able to prioritize effectively. So we talk about that. And then we talk about how to market and get yourself out there, because you can't be an undercover agent in the witness protection program about your ministry. You have to be vocal and have let people know about it. So we talk about that. So all the different things that I needed to know when started a ministry, we cover in this book.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I think, like you say, I think this book applies to like so many other areas. Like it's not just, I know you wrote it for people, women who might be going into ministry, but I'm just hearing women, entrepreneurs, professionals in
Yes.
general. Like this book is for you.
I'm
Yes.
glad you said that. Recently, I created a whole arm for Christian entrepreneurs because I realized that there are women who are called to the marketplace, and ministry does not look just like what we might think ministry is. It could
Hmm.
be in the boardroom, it could be on Zoom, it could be through coaching, it could be through it could be in so many different formats.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to help Christian entrepreneurs because that's what I am.
Yeah.
My ministry blends. Like I do trauma healing groups, I work with churches, across the country, I coach women, but it's my ministry. I pour into those people who I serve as an act of love to be a reflection of God. And I want
Yes.
other women to be able to wake up every day and say, I am doing what I'm called to do. And I love it.
Yes.
It's hard
Amen.
now. It's
Yeah.
hard, but I want them to be able to do it because it's worth it.
Yes. Oh, I love that. All right. Tell the audience where they can connect to you. I think you have a gift that you like to give to our community, and then also where they can make sure they know where they can buy the book as well.
Yeah, all of that is in one place. They just
Mhm.
need to go to sisterstartyourministry.com. Again, that's sisterstartyourministry.com. And they can download a free ministry launch starter kit. That's right at the top where you can learn about just all the different things that you can do, tools for starting your ministry. And then there's also information about how you can get my book. And I have a bundle that you can purchase. It's a Sister Start Your Ministry bundle where it's a book, workbook, and planner. So you can write that vision for your ministry. And there's also different challenges for starting your ministry. There's a whole bunch of resources. You need to visit
Yes.
that site.
We are going to, the first one is a two-parter. How do you start and end the day?
I started this new routine where I actually wake up and listen to meditation through Abide. I don't know if you're familiar with that app, but it's a Christian meditation site. And I started doing that because I noticed my mind being very noisy
Mhm.
and me being distracted. I wanted to find meditation, but I wanted to be rooted in my faith. And so that allows me to set my intentions early and say, okay, Jocelyn, I know you want to check your phone first thing and check your email. No, no, no. You plug into God to help you. And typically at the end of my day, I do a couple things. I attempt to journal. I don't always get it right, but journaling allows for me to quiet my mind because again, my mind could be noisy, and do some reading at night until
Mhm.
I fall asleep. So those are some of the things that I like to do as a
Okay,
routine.
awesome. All right, so I know we're getting toward the end of the year. So is there a goal or an intention that you had set for yourself this year? And do you mind sharing where you are?
Yeah, I do things differently. I don't focus on annual goals. I focus on quarterly goals.
Yes.
And so for me, it's kind of have a new reset every quarter.
Mhm.
And so this quarter I'm focusing on primarily promoting my new product line, if you will, which is the planner, which is new, my workbook. I'm going to be focusing on Black Friday sales and things of that nature.
Mhm.
So I'm really focusing on that. And I'm also focusing on building up my women in the ministry community, which if you go to sisterstartyourministry.com, you'll receive some information on that because I want to help as many women as possible to answer their call. And so I'm doing a lot of one-on-ones with women, meeting amazing, beautiful sisters on their journey. And so that's my primary focus is to meet one-on-one with as many women as possible who are called.
All right, and the last question is, where are you currently finding inspiration?
Ah, that's an amazing question. Well, I'm an avid reader. I love reading. And I also enjoy listening to podcasts such as this and just hearing stories and testimonies. And I also have an amazing sister circle. I have reevaluated my sister circle and I have focused on being around women who love the Lord, who challenge me to grow, who will pray with me, not just say, "Hey, I'm praying for you," but actually do it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
And they inspire me. When you are around other women who are giving you the same energy, who are progressive, you don't have to look on media to just be inspired. You can have someone right next to you who's calling you, not just calling you out, calling you up to your
Yes.
greatness. And that's what I love to be around.
Yes, I love that. All right. So, like I said, this has been so great. I have so appreciated this conversation. But I'm going to ask you one last thing before I let you go. And that is, what are three things you'd like the audience to take away from our conversation today?
I would like them to take away the fact that life will have its challenges. There will be moments of suffering, and you have to honor the emotions as we talked about, but you don't have to stay stuck. It's all in how you respond in understanding that you are resilient. You don't have to pretend to be strong all the time and pretend that you don't hurt or you don't feel because pretending hurts. And I don't want you to go through life pretending, but you do have agency. And in that agency, you can say, I need help. One of the strongest things you can do is to have a level of vulnerability to reach out and get the help and to do the work. So this is kind of, I'm combining all my answers. But I think the next thing is do the work. Do the work as relates to your mental health, your healing. Don't expect for your purpose and calling and vision that God has leading you to come easy. It's one of those things where I think it was John Maxwell who talked about people have a mountaintop vision, but they have downhill habits. And you're not going to get to the mountaintop as relates to what God's calling you to without climbing, without sweating, without having stumbles along the way. But it is worth it when you get to the top and see the beautifulness, that when you're able to look back and be like, oh my God, where you brought me from?
Mhm,
Ah,
mhm.
Jesus. Those are those moments, right? And so I think just understanding and acknowledging and just saying yielding to the process is my next lesson. And the final thing is if we are called to ministry, which I believe most of the people, if you call it ministry, if you call it business, whatever you're called to, whatever God put on your heart as your purpose,
Mhm.
don't try to do it without God. For me personally, particularly because I'm a woman of faith and I do call what I'm doing ministry, I say, Jocelyn, you can't do ministry for God without God. And many of us can get so caught up in trying to operate in our own strength for a God-sized vision, and you will fall short. It's one of those things where I yield and I have to seek God for direction on how this is going to move so that I can be able to stay in the game and be able to do what He's leading me to. So I just encourage people to stay plugged into their faith, know where their strength comes from, because you're not operating in your own strength when you're doing this work.
Yes, awesome. Love those. Thank you so very much, Reverend Jocelyn, for joining today. And you always, always, always can come back in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy.
Awesome. Stay tuned, everyone. I'll be right back.